December 14, 1981, a young girl named Dana Nicole Bradley vanished while hitchhiking home in St. John's, Newfoundland. She was only 14, carrying school books and gifts for her mother who was waiting to celebrate her birthday. Witnesses saw Dana enter a car driven by an unknown man, a driver who would never be identified. 4 days later, search efforts by local volunteers ended in tragedy when her body was discovered, carefully staged in a secluded wooded area. The crime sparked one of the largest investigations in Canadian history, with police officers chasing thousands of tips. In 1986, a man named David Somerton confessed, only to later retract his words, leaving more confusion than clarity. 4 decades later, Dana's story remains a haunting Canadian mystery. December 14, 1981, began like any other winter day in St. John's, Newfoundland. The city carried a quiet rhythm as people hurried through the cold, wrapped in coats and scarves, preparing for the holiday season that was just days away. Lights glowed from the windows of small homes and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke. For 14-year-old Dana Bradley, it was supposed to be a special evening. Her mother's birthday had given her a sense of excitement, and she was eager to get home in time to celebrate. Dana, with her long dark hair and youthful smile, was known as a bright and caring girl who loved her family deeply. That night, she left her friend's house with a plan so simple that no one thought twice about it. She would hitchhike the short distance home, something that was almost routine for teenagers in Newfoundland at the time. Dana clutched her school books against her side, balancing them with the gifts she had picked out for her mother. The streets along Topsail Road were slick with patches of snow, and passing cars created small sprays of slush against the curb. The evening sky had already grown dark, the kind of deep blue that settles quickly in a northern winter. Streetlights gave off halos of pale orange, and the occasional headlights of cars pierced through the shadows. She stepped closer to the roadside, watching for a kind driver to stop. Hitchhiking then carried far less stigma than it does today. For many young people, it was a convenient way to get home, a practice considered relatively safe in a close-knit place like St. John's. But on this night, safety was an illusion. Somewhere among the cars traveling that road was a driver who noticed Dana, a man whose intentions were far darker than she could have imagined. A witness later recalled seeing her open the door of a dark-colored sedan and climb inside, her schoolbook still under her arm. That seemingly ordinary act marked the moment her life crossed into danger, though no one watching could have known it. To anyone passing by, it looked harmless, even routine. Dana was just another teenager catching a ride home. Back at her house, her family was waiting, preparing for the birthday dinner that was supposed to include laughter, warmth, and the joy of being together. Hours passed and her empty chair at the table grew more unsettling with each tick of the clock. The gifts she had chosen never made it into her mother's hands. Calls to friends revealed that Dana had left as planned, and worry began to settle over the household. It was unusual for her to be late, even stranger for her to disappear without any word. What started as mild concern turned into dread as the night stretched into the early hours of morning. By the next day, Dana Bradley was officially listed as missing. A celebration had turned into panic, and an ordinary winter evening had transformed into the beginning of one of the most haunting mysteries Canada would ever face. Sighting of Dana Bradley climbing into a dark sedan became the single most crucial piece of information investigators had in the early days of the case. Topsail Road was a busy stretch, connecting neighborhoods and carrying steady evening traffic. But in that fleeting moment, one man and one car altered the course of a young girl's life. The vehicle was described as a 4-door sedan, possibly a Dodge or a Plymouth, dark in color and fairly common in Newfoundland during that era. For detectives, this description was both a clue and a curse. The roads were filled with similar cars, and narrowing down which one had carried Dana away was like searching for a shadow in the dark. The practice of hitchhiking, though common, was not without its dangers. Teenagers often relied on the kindness of strangers, or sometimes neighbors they did not know personally, to give them rides. The idea of refusing seemed foreign, even rude in a community where trust often outweighed suspicion. Dana, carrying her books and focused on reaching home for her mother's birthday, would not have thought twice when a driver pulled over. She stepped into the warmth of the car, unaware that this decision would be her last chance at freedom. As the sedan pulled away, Dana disappeared from the view of those who had seen her at the roadside. For investigators piecing together her movements, this was the last confirmed moment she was alive. What happened inside the car remains one of the greatest unanswered questions in the case. Was she tricked by a friendly demeanor that quickly turned sinister? Did she realize too late that she was trapped with someone who had no intention of taking her home? These questions still linger decades later, hanging over the story like fog over a winter landscape. The police focused immediately on identifying the mysterious driver. Roadblocks were set up, and officers spoke to hundreds of motorists in the area. Flyers were distributed and tips began to pour in from the public. Some thought they recognized the car. Others believed they had seen Dana further down the road, though their memories blurred as days passed. Every lead seemed promising at first, but each one dissolved under closer scrutiny. The sedan remained an enigma, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. For Dana's family, the not knowing was unbearable. Each hour stretched into torment as they clung to the possibility that she might still be alive somewhere. Yet even in those early days, there was a sense that something was terribly wrong. Dana had been responsible, careful, and deeply connected to her family. It was unthinkable that she would willingly vanish or stay away without contact. The disappearance unsettled the entire city. Parents grew fearful, teenagers were warned not to hitchhike, and an uneasy suspicion spread through the community. Anyone could be the driver, the neighbor next door, the stranger at the store, or a coworker passing by. As the search intensified, one truth became clear. Somewhere in St. John's, a man with a dark sedan carried a secret too heavy to hide forever. 4 days after Dana Bradley disappeared, the search that had gripped St. John's came to a devastating end. Volunteers, police officers, and neighbors had scoured roadsides and wooded trails, hoping against hope to find her safe. Instead, on December 18, 1981, a grim discovery was made along Maddox Cove Road, a remote and forested stretch just outside the city. There, hidden among the trees, lay Dana's body. The cold winter air preserved the scene in chilling stillness, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. For the people who found her, the image would remain etched in memory forever. The discovery sent shockwaves through Newfoundland. Dana was no longer just a missing child. She had become the victim of a brutal crime. Investigators quickly secured the area, but the details they uncovered raised more questions than answers. Dana had suffered a violent end. Evidence showed she had been struck on the head, a fatal blow that cut her life short. Signs of sexual assault added another layer of horror, turning a case of disappearance into one of the darkest crimes the province had ever witnessed. What disturbed investigators most was not only the brutality, but also the eerie arrangement of Dana's body. Beneath her arm, her school books had been carefully tucked, as though someone had deliberately placed them there after the act. This detail left detectives unsettled. Was it a sign of remorse, a twisted attempt at respect, or a mocking gesture meant to haunt those who would find her? It gave the crime an element of staging, a sense that the killer wanted to send a message, though no one could decipher its meaning. The wooded area itself was chosen with precision. Maddox Cove Road was not a place one would stumble upon easily. It was secluded, known mostly to locals and far from Dana's planned route home. Whoever left her body there likely knew the area well, suggesting the killer may have been from the community or familiar with its hidden corners. This narrowed the field in theory, yet in practice it widened suspicion to nearly everyone. St. John's was no longer a place of unquestioned trust. News of Dana's death traveled quickly, leaving the city in mourning. Her classmates struggled to make sense of the loss. Her teachers grieved the promising life cut short, and her family was left shattered, robbed not only of a daughter, but also of the peace that comes with closure. Candlelight vigils were held, and for days the front pages of newspapers carried her photograph, a young girl with dark hair and a bright smile, next to headlines of violence and unanswered questions. As the community gathered in sorrow, investigators pressed forward, combing through the forest for every possible trace of evidence. Tire tracks, footprints, fibers, anything that could point to the identity of the killer. Yet the harsh reality was clear from the start. The crime scene, though haunting, revealed little that could lead to an arrest. Dana Bradley's body had been found, but the person responsible had already slipped back into the shadows. Investigation into Dana Bradley's murder quickly grew into one of the largest and most exhaustive efforts ever undertaken in Newfoundland. From the moment her body was discovered, Police knew they were facing a case that demanded every possible resource. Officers interviewed neighbors, classmates, and anyone who had been traveling on Topsail Road the night Dana vanished. Hundreds of conversations turned into thousands, each one documented and filed, yet none provided the definitive answer that could bring justice. Leads poured in from across the province, and every sedan resembling the dark-colored car seen near Dana was checked, inspected, and catalogued. The sheer number of vehicles made the task overwhelming. What was supposed to be a clear path forward soon became a tangle of dead ends. Public pressure weighed heavily on the investigation. Newspapers reported every update, radio stations relayed appeals for information, and families across the city felt the fear creeping closer to their own homes. Parents urged children not to hitchhike, and strangers eyed one another with suspicion. The community wanted answers, but the trail grew colder with each passing week. Police sketches of possible suspects were circulated, tips were collected, and reward money was offered, but the silence of the killer remained unbroken. In 1986, 5 years after Dana's murder, a shocking twist reignited attention. A man named David Somerton confessed to the crime, providing chilling details that matched parts of the investigation. For a brief moment, the public believed the nightmare was over and justice would finally be served. But cracks in the confession soon appeared. Somerton recanted, claiming he had been pressured and that his story was not true. The charges collapsed, and with them hope faded once again. Investigators were left frustrated, and the community was left with more confusion than closure. Was Somerton truly lying, or had the truth slipped through their hands yet again? As the years moved forward, technology began to evolve. By the 1990s and 2000s, advances in DNA testing gave fresh momentum to the case. Samples were re-examined, and suspects were compared against new evidence. Forensic teams worked tirelessly to find a match, but results repeatedly ruled people out rather than pointing toward the person responsible. The very science that promised answers instead reinforced how elusive the truth remained. Each new round of testing sparked headlines and renewed public interest, only to fade into disappointment when no arrest followed. Despite decades of effort, investigators never stopped. Even in 2006, nearly 25 years after the crime, police reported receiving more than 50 tips every year about Dana's murder. Some callers offered theories, others claimed knowledge, and a few insisted they knew who the killer was. Every lead was followed, but each one eventually unraveled under scrutiny. The case had become a labyrinth where every turn circled back to the beginning. By the time 2016 arrived, the investigation had spanned generations of officers. Files grew into cabinets into rooms, and the unanswered questions only multiplied. For those who had worked the case from the beginning, the failure to find Dana's killer was more than professional disappointment. It was personal heartbreak. The community that once trusted in safety had never fully recovered, and the absence of justice for a 14-year-old girl left a wound that time could not close. More than 4 decades have passed since the night Dana Bradley vanished, yet her story continues to echo through Newfoundland. Time has moved forward, but for her family and for those who remember her, the wound has never truly healed. Dana should have grown into adulthood, celebrated milestones, and built a life of her own. Instead, she became a symbol of innocence lost and justice denied. Each anniversary of her disappearance brings renewed headlines, quiet vigils, and lingering questions that no one has been able to answer. The unsolved nature of the case has transformed it into one of Canada's most haunting mysteries. St. John's, once viewed as a safe and trusting community, carries the shadow of Dana's murder to this day. Residents who were children at the time still recall the fear that spread through neighborhoods. Parents began warning their sons and daughters about the dangers of hitchhiking, something that had once been considered harmless. Generations later, the cautionary stories remain, and Dana's name is spoken not only as a memory but as a warning. What has continued to trouble investigators and the public alike is the unsettling detail of the staged crime scene. The careful placement of Dana's books beneath her arm has fueled countless theories. Some believe it was an act of remorse, a killer overwhelmed by guilt who tried to preserve a fragment of her dignity. Others see it as the opposite, a deliberate taunt, a way of mocking the family and investigators who would find her. The truth behind that small but powerful gesture remains locked in the mind of the person who committed the crime. Over the years, rumors and theories have circulated endlessly. Some suggest the killer was a local man, familiar with the secluded areas outside St. John's, someone who knew exactly where to leave a body without being noticed. Others believe the crime may have been opportunistic, the work of a stranger passing through. The confession of David Somerton still divides opinion. While officially dismissed, there are those who wonder whether more should have been done to confirm or challenge his claims. Each new generation of investigators revisits the files, hoping that modern technology or fresh eyes will reveal what decades of searching have failed to uncover. Despite advances in forensic science, the case has stubbornly resisted resolution. DNA testing has ruled people out, but never identified the person responsible. Witness memories have faded, suspects have died, and key opportunities from the early 1980s were lost in the limitations of that time. Yet the case is not closed. Police continue to treat it as active, and tips are still encouraged. The hope is that someone somewhere knows the truth, perhaps a person who has carried a heavy secret for years. Dana Bradley's murder is more than a story of violence. It is a story of resilience in the face of tragedy. The community of Newfoundland has not forgotten her, and her family has never stopped longing for justice. Each passing year makes the mystery feel colder, yet it also sharpens the determination of those who refuse to let her name fade. The question remains the same as it did in 1981. Who killed Dana Bradley, and will the truth ever see the light of day? What do you think happened to Dana Bradley? Was the killer a stranger passing through or someone from within her own community? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you want more deep dives into chilling cold cases and unsolved mysteries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Crime Diaries ZA, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.